Hi, we've got a crazy messy wall in the office here. It's got a hole, there's mud on the wall, and the paint is unfinished, and there's this clutter in the closet. How can we fix this? I guess the first step here is to wipe off all this mud. This is the primary path that our dogs take to get to the backyard. I hope it's just mud. I got this gallon of paint for $9. That's a pretty good deal. As I've said in previous videos, I primarily use Oops paints from Home Depot. I'm just scooting some mats over to catch any spilled paint. I really like this color. It's a dark bluish green. Usually in our house I prefer light colors because we have small windows and we need more light, but I'm making an exception for this wall. I recently found this paintbrush in the garage and I cleaned it up and thought I'd try using it for this project. A roller would have been a lot faster, but I didn't want to lose any paint to pouring it into a pan and all those exchanges. So this house has kind of a weird shape. You access the backyard through this bedroom. So for us having dogs, we took off the bedroom door and then we put a doggy door in the exterior facing door. So this room was kind of like a catch-all for a bit, just all of the stuff that we didn't have room for in the house and crafts and storage. But now we're ready for it to be an office slash craft room slash homework room. So right here, I got a little spot on the trim, and it doesn't bother me in the office, but I hate it in this video. It's almost enough for me to get the stepladder out and fix it right now. But when I turn and look at it in real life, it's not that bad. I'll just leave it. I was told that this is called cutting in. It's just when you carefully paint along the trim and it comes out pretty straight. I've worked some non-profit jobs where the offices were painted by volunteers, and the bad paint job would totally drive me nuts. So we'll see if I have a double standard for myself. We'll see. Hopefully I can make it look good. I don't normally have very still hands, but for this I just took a deep breath and tried to go for it. So I've considered taking out this door frame. It's pretty ugly and we really don't need it, but I don't know if we're going to need a door here later on in the future, and if that's the case, I don't want to do the work to put a door frame back in, so I'm just kind of held hostage by this what if. I guess in the very least I could fill in all those little gaps and holes. At this point there are a lot of streaks in this paint job. But whether it's with a roller or a really old found paintbrush, I think a second coat is always required. You get a chance to even out the paint and catch any mistakes you made. I'm trying to be thorough, even though I'm planning on covering up most of this wall with posters. Have you ever went to move a large piece of furniture or an appliance and you find that the people before didn't paint behind it, like they couldn't just move the fridge before they started painting? And then it's like, surprise, this whole wall is ugly now. So I really hate when that happens because it just makes the other people look really lazy. But maybe I am doing that with this hole in the wall that I'm not fixing, because it's actually harder than just painting. I'm going to use some old fence boards here to make a rustic looking frame, and that's going to hold a whiteboard that's going to cover that big hole in the wall. Gosh, that actually seems worse than just not painting it, because now whoever has to clean this up in the future has to patch up the hole and paint the entire wall because we won't have a matching paint anymore. But that's just the way we're doing it today. So these are some old redwood fence boards. I picked these up for free somewhere, and I'm cutting them into 1.5 inch strips. And I set this little guide to 45 degrees, and these pieces are going to frame up a whiteboard. Every once in a while I'll find someone throwing away their old fence boards and I'll go pick them up because I have a dog that will destroy our fence. She'll chew it up or run at it like a wrecking ball and try to break it. So I just always have fence boards on hand just so I can easily replace whatever section she breaks out. And it's not entirely her fault. We have a few neighbors around here that have several outdoor cats. So they come around, I think they're teasing her or something. They're saying something nasty to her, so she attacks the fence. And then I'll use the boards for projects like this. I got this table saw for free from a guy in Sunnyvale. If you're okay with used table saws, then there's always cheap ones available. I'm lowering the depth of the blade to cut a little notch for the whiteboard. Just before I had this table saw, I had picked up another one for $50. But this one has a much bigger table and it has wheels on the bottom so I can move it, and it was free. So then I sold the other one for $40 to get some of my money back. But if you have the ability to store a table saw, then I suggest getting one. I think it helps to repurpose reclaimed wood. And me personally, I use reclaimed wood because I don't think I can afford new lumber, but I've also heard that it's pretty good for the environment. It just seems like it's a more efficient use of our resources. It just took a couple passes here to get the notch I needed. I'm just cleaning out the notch I cut here. Chisels are super handy to have around, but you gotta use clamps. I had a habit of holding the piece of lumber with my left hand, and I ended up cutting myself real bad, so don't do that. I think you probably need to sand any woodworking project you do, but when you work with old fence boards, you have to sand it forever. I basically sand it until the wood looks clean. Like if the wood is salvageable, you can make it look cleaner than it did in the store. Sometimes it's easy, but a couple of these pieces give me a lot of trouble. I pulled out the belt sander, which is like my orbital sander's big brother, but it needed a new belt, so it sanded nothing. I don't know why that one board was so tough. If you're ever going to use fence boards for a project, just make sure you take down all the fuzziness and splinters. Whether they are new or old fence boards, they come pretty rough, but they can be cleaned up. Yeah, this is a lot of work. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who will never use reclaimed wood. It takes extra time and it has a lot of problems. But when the cost of lumber is just outside of your budget, but you have time, this is a good alternative. Normally, I don't like having my screw heads showing, but this is rustic and it's in my own office. I'm drilling holes here because I don't want the screws to split the end of the board. Like sometimes I'll be giving a screw one last turn and then a split appears, and as a reflex I'll reverse the screw, but that doesn't erase the split, but like I wish it would. I'm putting the first piece into the stud in the wall, but the rest are going to go into anchors. So yeah, this frame is just going to go over that hole in the wall there. So whenever I feel like getting rid of this whiteboard, I'll have all these anchor holes to fill and that giant hole to patch up. These like rustic, eclectic elements kind of give my office a treehouse, clubhouse feel. I think I mentioned that in my video about my desk I made out of pallets. It kind of has Little Rascals vibes. It's probably very likely that I'm living out a childhood dream. But like I said in that desk video, it's your world, just make it the way you want it. I don't know how we got that chip in the corner of the whiteboard, but I hate it. We had this thing stored for a while, so maybe it just got bumped or something like that. And now I'm putting up some fancy science-y posters so my kids can see science on the walls and then write down their science thoughts on this whiteboard. After all the trouble to build that frame for the whiteboard, I'm just putting these up with push pins. I mean, they're clear push pins, so it's like very close to invisible. So now this wall is mostly covered and I have to do something about that weird closet. Someone left this old coffee table at my house a long time ago, so I've been using it as a workbench. Let's repurpose it. I really hate using MDF for projects that I sell, so I don't mind, I guess, using this for a project in the house. I'm just going to use this tabletop for a bench in that closet. It's like the exact size of that closet. This one piece didn't break off, but it's separating a little bit, so I'm just going to throw some glue in there that does nothing. I'll end up putting screws in later on. I'll just need it to give some strength to that side of the bench. The board is like pretty thick and heavy, so I figured it would make a good bench. Like as a coffee table, I always wanted to sit on it. But right now it's filthy, and I'll use the sander to mostly clean it. A tolerable level of clean, somewhat clean. This is just the underside. It just needs to not have any critters living in it. The top side has a pretty thick veneer, but it has a lot of discolorations from paint and stains and water damage. It's going to get covered with paint and with a cushion, so it's probably okay if it's kind of ugly. I just have different standards for when it's my own office. This bench isn't going to have any support in the front and middle, so it just needs to be really strong wood. The ends of the edge banding is coming off, so I just put in a little bit of wood glue and some nails. And I assume some paint will hide that. I have the camera too close here, so I had to turn the hammer sideways. One of my hammers fell in this little paint can and the claw went straight through the lid. So now I gotta use it up before it dries. I wasn't planning on using this color, but I guess it's fine. Sometimes the hammer chooses your paint color. And as I normally do, I'm using a dollar store paintbrush, and that's with a can of Oops paint, which is like discounted mistake paint at Home Depot, and it's going on a discarded coffee table. So that's like many levels of frugality. But that's like the spirit of this channel. We found these, trying to make these budget-friendly projects using mostly found materials. I'm going to put these miscellaneous scrap 2x4s in the closet to hold up the bench. I want to fasten the boards to the studs in the wall, but believe it or not, the studs in the walls are like 25 inches apart in some places. I didn't expect that when I came up with this plan. So I have to make these angled cuts so the boards can stick out a little from under the bench and meet in the back corners of the closet, because there just aren't enough studs to go around. These boards will have to share. And I didn't have a miter saw at the time of the project, so I had to do all this with my old circular saw, which is kind of a struggle. So regarding some of the studs being 25 inches apart, is that going to be an issue at some point? Is my house okay? Like, one of these walls is to the exterior. I looked up when it became standard to put studs 16 inches apart, and the internet told me they started doing that after World War II. My house was built in like 1953, so I guess it was a bit of a gray area. Speaking of gray area, I'm painting the ends of these boards that same grayish blue since they'll be sticking out a little from under the bench. The rest of it can look dirty and dusty because no one will ever see it. But when it comes to the top of the bench, there's a chance we might have to occasionally move the cushion that will cover it. So I felt like I should put on a second coat of this paint and just finish out the little can. I repacked some of the boxes that were stacked here and moved them to the garage. But these bins of craft materials need to be reviewed by management at a later time. So for now, we're just going to work around them. No problem, we'll just cover this up with a bench. So the studs right here are 24 inches apart. This is just the wall between two closets, but these ones are 25 and they're the exterior facing wall. So that's kind of weird to me. But the wall doesn't show any signs of shifting after 70 years and a few big earthquakes and the occasional storm. So maybe it's fine. Time to test the weight capacity of this little bench, give it a little bounce. Oh, okay, don't do that. And we still got a bunch of craft material up here. I'm using some rigid wire I found to hang this cool looking umbrella to kind of cover and decorate the upper storage area of this closet. And I'll put a little light behind it. It should look cool. And now we're back outside. This is a futon. It's in really good condition. I just picked it up for free. This guy was in Livermore and he was getting rid of it, so I was all over it. You see, foam like this is pretty expensive at the fabric store, but there are usually people out there trying to get rid of futons. I figure I could use the wood slats for another project, and I'll cut up the metal. I'll save the long pieces for something that might come up in the future, and just throw away the rest. I didn't want to go inside to look for a marker, so I tried using this weird knife to mark my measurements. Does anyone out there know what this kind of knife is for? I found two old ones. I just use them for cutting up sheets of sandpaper. I'm making cuts here that only go halfway through to make it easier to bend the foam at these points. It's not a perfect fold, but it works. And while I'm out here, I'll make some cuts on these old scrap boards. These are going to be some rustic looking 25-inch shelves. Oh, we got some mud on the end of that, but I'll just cut it off. These little shelves are going to go inside the closet in that little bench area, just for like little books or devices or knickknacks or something. I don't remember where I got this lumber from originally, but like 15 years ago I used it to make shelves in the garage, and I doubt that I sanded them back then, and then I stored them outside for a bit. So these are in pretty desperate need of resurfacing, and I'm not getting them perfect, just good enough for my own office. And I'm going to cut some little right triangles. These are going to mount the shelves to the studs in the wall. This would be so much easier with the miter saw, but I did not have one at the time of this project, as I've already mentioned. I came across a nail in this board, so I tried to cut it with this really old hacksaw, and it took a really long time. I just wanted to see how that saw would cut. I have other hacksaws. These screws are going in right at the ends of the boards, and that tends to make things split. We'll see if I drill big enough holes for them. Then I'm just squeezing these boards together with my hands like if they were a clamp. I wish that I had a clamp situation for this because it was difficult to do. And I surprisingly got this square enough to work. Let's go ahead and screw this into the studs that are 25 inches apart. I prefer to fasten shelves to studs instead of wall anchors, just in case some maniac tries to do a chin up on them. Right here you can see where that board split a little bit when I was putting screws in earlier. It's probably fine. I'm just going to tap in some tiny nails around the perimeter of this thing. I just put in some cozy lighting here. This little bench closet thing is meant to be like a reading nook. I like these little plug-in light switch things. The price went up for them at Home Depot, but I think they're pretty cheap on Amazon. So we can test this out. Perfect for my kid to do reading and homework. So just one final piece. There's one space on the wall that I wanted to fill up. I found this old frame in my garage, but I didn't like the color. This is Ruckus, Huckleberry, and then Goonie. The Wrecking Crew. It's funny because they totally wreck stuff and then I get angry and then it's like, well then don't have dogs. No, I want dogs. I guess I like being angry. I've always thought it'd be cool to have pictures of my dogs in my office, and this is my first time having an office. You saw me cut up those foam pieces earlier. I sewed up the covers to fit the new sizes. I just did it by hand while sitting on the couch. It's a nice cozy spot for a little kid. Gosh, I was just going to paint the wall, but since I got the camera out, it became a whole thing. This project just kind of got away from me there. I hope you enjoyed hanging out in the office with me.